Welcome to the House of Hoosier podcast. I'm your host, AJ Guyton. I'm here with my main man, Austin Platt. Austin, you have some good news to tell everybody. Let's start off the show on a positive note. I seem to be losing my Austins, over the last couple of years. But that's what it's all about, is seeing other people, elevate slowly but surely and get to the top of that mountain. So what you got going on, Austin?
Hey, I wish I could be as good as Austin Render, of course, my predecessor, but I'm happy to announce I'll be one of the beat reporters for the IDS, the Indiana Daily Student, the student newspaper for the softball team this upcoming spring. Hope to be calling some games as well, and I'll be covering the infamous Little 500. And AJ, I bet you have known a little thing or two about that with your time here at IU, but I'm excited for this spring. Of course, basketball comes first, and nothing will really officially start until basketball ends, but I'm excited for this next semester.
Well, I'm going to leave my memories for a little 500 behind, since I'm a married man and I'm doing really well in the world right now. But, that's an awesome opportunity for you, Austin, man. We are obviously happy for you, man, and keep climbing that mountain. That's what this is all about. Last time we were on the show, we had Jess Settles on the show, man, and I asked him who he thought would win the Indiana-Iowa game, and he picked Iowa. Of course, he went to Iowa. He's born and bred Iowa, so he was going to pick Iowa. But I was kind of shaking my head internally, like, no way Indiana loses this game at Iowa. And, it turned out to be one of those classic games. Indiana jumped out to a large lead, 27-4, I believe, or 27 points. And slowly but surely, Iowa started chipping away, man. And I just felt like it was the same story over and over again. It was like an opportunity to blow somebody out the water, and then we don't make timely shots as they're continuing to get back in the game. We cannot stop the bleeding. Iowa switched to a zone, and we act like we never seen it before. And that happens a lot, because you spend your week a lot of times preparing for man-to-man. You prepare for a little bit of everything, but 80% of your time you're thinking they're going to play man. And in the middle of a hot streak, they switch to a zone. It slows you down. It makes you think now. You weren't thinking, prior to, and they slowly but surely got back in the game. Now, we do understand that there were a couple of injuries that happened, another injury to a key player. I think if Race Thompson doesn't get injured in this particular game, Indiana probably wins this game, even though it still might be a 5-10 point game. But I think Indiana would have pulled it out, because this is that particular game, that one game in the Big Ten where they had no answer for the inside, the inside of Thompson and Trace. So him getting injured had a major effect on this game. But as Mike Woodson talks about, it's always next man up, man. We have to recruit, and we have to have the expectation to the point where we're not worried about who's not playing. We are worried about who's playing, and they can come out and they can execute, the game plan and continue to play and win the basketball game. So, as you watched that game, Austin, did you feel a sense that Iowa was going to come back, and that Indiana was going to let this lead slip prior to the Race Thompson injury?
Sadly, I think so, yes. And I honestly thought that Iowa was going to win this game going in. I just felt with the long layoff. I think with Jackson Davis not playing in the Elon and Kennesaw State games, it worried me that it was more than just a load management kind of thing, and that there was a real injury. And I think we saw that during that game at halftime. He kind of limped off. He was getting a lot of treatment done kind of in between. And I know he played a bunch of minutes, but I was a bit skeptical of this game going in, and it kind of felt inevitable that it was going to happen again. It felt like the same game as last year at Iowa. Indiana gets off to a great start. They're making their outside shots, and then they just kind of get drowned out by the crowd. Some turnovers. I know last year's game was a big reason why, but once that zone came, AJ, Indiana, they weren't as good on offense. They were still able to progress through it. I think they did a decent job of that, but the loss to Race Thompson really just took the air out of the balloon. And even without a bunch of students in Carver Hawkeye Arena, a definitely rejuvenated and motivated Iowa team, of course, playing for one of their brothers in Patrick McCaffery, who stepped away for good reason. They're playing for him, and it kind of felt like it was going to happen. And once it got close, you just felt like Indiana might have lost this game by double digits. They did a good job staying in it, had some big shots late, but eventually just time was not on their side, and they couldn't get it done once they get on the road.
The thing as I'm watching the game, I did think Indiana would pull this out. I knew it was going to be a very close game, but this was prior to the injuries. I felt like Indiana had too much depth at that time, not knowing going to the game that somebody would get injured. But what scares me the most about that game and made me open an eye, I never panic, but I do open an eye every now and then, was that, we can't seem – Kris Murray seems to turn into Keegan every time he plays Indiana. And then we have, I think it was Connor McCaffery, playing with so much confidence. Guys like that playing with confidence against guys that, I feel are much better, athletically, intellectually, and just physically better players. But when you allow a guy to play with that much confidence, control the tempo offensively, when you have guys like, Sanderford making shots, you got guys like coming in, what's my guy's name? The guard, what is Tony Perkins? Tony Perkins making plays and playing with confidence. That's what began to scare me, because it showed me that we're not able to withstand runs. We're not able to make the play to take a person's, we call it taking their heart out. It's like, okay, you made a 7-8-0 run, but watch this. We finna go on another 8-0 run, and we're going to take your heart out, and then you're going to use all that energy and end up losing the basketball game. So when I saw, the way that Kris Murray was playing and McCaffery was playing, that was a little bit disappointing, because I feel like we have, I think Kurt Murray ended up with 30 points, 30 and 10, you know what I mean? And it canceled out with Trace, because Trace also ended up with a 30 and 9. But, we can't have a guy like, what's his name? Philip Rebracha, 19 points. Come on, man. Like this, there's no way around that. You don't prepare to stop Philip Rebracha. There's no disrespect to Philip, very solid college basketball player, but with him and Kris, that's 49 points on the front line. That's just, you can't, especially when your other frontline player gets injured, you just can't come back from that end. I thought that was a devastating loss to Indiana. I think it's not a do or die, win or lose situation, because it was we were 1-2 at the time. So, but I looked at it, I was like, from emotional standpoint, you're looking at it like we're supposed to be better than that team. And they pretty much controlled the game after the second TV timeout. Iowa pretty much controlled the game, because that's when they got back into the game. So, that's the part of it I looked at, and I was a little bit disappointed. I thought we froze up like we did in the past against the 2-3 zone. We don't make the timely shots. We shoot very well in the beginning, it seems like. And then we'll get that. We'll get a lull. As always, we go 3 or 4 or 5 minutes without scoring, and then we'll make some shots towards the end of the second half, and then we'll come out flat in the second half. That's kind of the theme for Indiana basketball. What can Mike Woodson do to try to fix that issue of the inconsistent play with players?
Well, one, I think you still have to figure out the lineup. And we knew going in that we're going to have to see this Indiana team for 40 minutes without Xavier Johnson in a game that really matters in that broad perspective, and just trying to figure out the guys. I think one of the biggest things that people that I know at least follow were kind of disappointed about is maybe the adjustments that Woodson made. Maybe they're a bit too early. I mean, Indiana was up 28-7. It was a football score literally at one point. And then you kind of see the second unit, which just has not produced as much this year, start to really struggle instead of really trying to extend that lead as much as you can, because it felt like Indiana's starting five was just as good, especially with Race Thompson, and maybe even a lot better than Iowa's starting five. But in the end, AJ, Iowa had 5 guys in double digits. That's not going to win you many games. And considering, we talked about last year, IU's depth was a problem. And now, once again, it's really being tested. We saw this on Sunday against Northwestern. Trace Jackson-Davis plays all 40 minutes, and it doesn't look like he's 100% physically. So it's just the second unit guys maybe not getting as many minutes as they should, or maybe playing too many minutes in a situation like that could have been a problem. But, free throws are another big issue for Indiana. It's been that way kind of all year long. They made just 17 of 26, a measly 65% compared to an Iowa team that only missed 3 and had just as many opportunities at the charity stripe, and that was a problem. And then, of course, the incident with Fran McCaffery at the very end of the game. He was very animated from the very beginning. I got a technical foul early, and then, of course, what happened when he kind of walked across the half-court line when our guy, Yasir Rosemond, who we had on the show earlier this year, was kind of asking the ref a question. Of course, the call is very ticky-tacky, went both ways. It felt like after that technical foul, a lot of the calls were going to Iowa. And I'm curious for you as a former player, of course, you had Bob Knight, a guy who was definitely very animated. How did you try and drown that out and not try and worry about what he's trying to do and what he's trying to say to the refs and maybe what other people are saying? And how did you focus on the basketball game? Because I think once that happened, Indiana just kind of felt like that was the thorn.
It was a thorn, and I watched that play, and it's a different day. And when I played, our assistant coaches weren't getting up and talking to the officials or complaining about calls. Coach Knight pretty much, he controlled the officials the way that he wanted to control the officials, and so we never really ever saw that issue. I'm thinking back, I don't remember a time where our assistant coach got up. They may have gotten up and said something to Coach Knight to remind them to say something to the officials. But this is the new age of basketball. Officials, coaches empowering their assistants to get up and to see things that they don't see and to voice their concerns as well. So, but there's no excuse for what Coach McCaffery did. I didn't understand why he got a T and then it was rescinded. At the end of the day, I think, these referees are showing more than now than ever that they're human and they feel a sense of, if I make this call, this could change the outcome of the game. And they're trying not to make these calls, but that's unfair. When you make a call, you make a call, regardless of whether it's a good call or bad call. I had to play, my daughter played in the game the other day, like last week, hit a game-tying shot. I felt when he shot it, I thought it was after the buzzer. But at the end of the day, the referee called it good. So I'm saying you have to live with the calls you make. And you go back, look at the tape and say, I made a mistake. At least come out the following day and say, hey, the T that on Fran McCaffery should have stuck with that, and it should not have been rescinded. That was referees and officials, especially in a time like now where everything is so visible. You have camera angles, you got people wearing microphones, you can hear whatever you want to hear. They have to start to take accountability for the mistakes that they're making that's costing teams games. And at the end of the day, what McCaffery did to him, there's no excuse to cross the boundary, no excuse to cross the half-court line, no excuse to worry about what Roseman is saying to the officials. There's no excuse, and I love what Mike Woodson said after the game, and keep it plain and simple as bullshit at the end of the day. And it cost I won't say it cost Indiana the game, but it was a hell of a swing and an opportunity for Indiana to take advantage of it that they didn't get the chance. So, when Bob Knight dominated the conversation with the officials, I never really spoke to the official as a player. I was so focused on what we were doing. But, I never want to lean on officials making plays. Trace Jackson Davis with a bad back, 30 points and 9 rebounds. That's enough from his position. Jalen Hood-Schifino, 21 points. He's turning the ball over a little bit too much, and we'll get to that with the Northwestern game. He's scoring some points, showing that he's the prospect that people said he was. But in order to win in the Big Ten, his possessions matter. You cannot give the ball to the other team and expect to win. You cannot consistently miss outside open shots at the wrong time and expect to be in the basketball game. You remember, I don't know if you were young enough to remember the I think it was like the 2007 college basketball March Madness game. There's a video game that was on PlayStation, and they had something called a momentum meter. Like when you got up early in the game, you got up a lot in the game, the whole screen will just start shaking. If you were the other team, that's how that's a real thing in college basketball. You have to have the mental toughness and the awareness to understand when there's a run coming. On one side, when you're losing, when you're winning and that run is coming, you have to find a way to get to the free throw line. You have to make a big shot. You have to remember, I told you we need a player like, I think JHS is showing that can go get their own and make it happen. That's that moment on the road, because the screen is shaking. I'm watching the game and the screen's shaking. I'm like, he can't use all his timeouts. He can only use so many. It's up to you players to break this momentum. You have to come together and say, hey, 3 stops in a row. We need them now. We got to get 3 stops. We can't let Connor McCaffery get to the line or shot fakers get us in the air and we foul him. We have to stay disciplined. They're going to make a run. Basketball is a game of runs. But what I'm seeing from Indiana is we can't stop them. And, they throw it in the Trace. He's a guy that can stop him, but they're going to double team him. Now we kick it out to you guys, somebody has to make a play. And that's where I think we scored enough points. We were forced to play small to score enough points. But when you play small, it's something you have to practice as well. Just can't go into a game and say, we're going to play small today and we're going to kick ass on defense. Like now you have to switch everything. Your communication has to be on point. You can't miss switches. You can't be pointing. I saw a lot of pointing. You have to make those switches. And you have to make people play over the top of you. And that's what Indiana didn't do. They didn't break the momentum meter. And that's why they end up losing that game at Iowa. That's the way the road works. That thing you can't hear your own thoughts, because the crowd is getting so into it. So you have to have the mental toughness, awareness to say, this is that moment. I need somebody on that bench to say, all right, man, we're up 10 on Penn State. We were up 15 on Penn State. They made an 8-0 run. Now we up. This is the moment. Let's make a play. And I think this is where Indiana is. And as we segue and go into the Northwestern game, I think this is where they are. What do you think from that Iowa game that you were looking for going into the Northwestern game as improvements from the Iowa game?
The biggest thing for me was the switching on defense. And Iowa is every single year they find shooters where it felt like if they pulled someone out of the third row from Carver Hawkeye, they could have made a three at any time, because that's the way Iowa works. They always have great perimeter shooters. And I thought Indiana did well enough. I did okay, maybe not well enough to win that game defensively in terms of defending on the perimeter. But I just want to see a bit better defense, considering Northwestern's main offense comes from their two main guards. And I think just a bit better communication, knowing that you have that film to look back on, and you had really those 2 weeks to prepare for, of course, the Iowa game. Not as much time really at all for the Northwestern game in retrospect to prepare, but I think that was just one of the biggest things I wanted to see. Better communication on defense and just not as many open perimeter shots. Northwestern, it felt like, was a team that wasn't going to make as much of them. That was not the case at all, and it was a complete 180 where Indiana comes out hot out of the gate at Iowa, and it looked like they were still asleep for the Northwestern game. Of course, the short turnaround, you got a long, really emotionally gauged game against Iowa where it's a late 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock local time start. You got to come back on a flight to Bloomington. By the time you sleep, it's 24 hours before the next game when the students aren't even all back. So that was tough, and I think that showed in the first 10 minutes or so when Indiana was down by more than double digits.
Right. And let's go into the Northwestern game. Northwestern's coming to the game with thinking that they're not as explosive offensively as Iowa. We come out and they're getting every shot possible in the book. They just found a nice rhythm because they got every open shot they wanted, whether it was layup dunks or whether it was wide open shots. And it was all due to the lack of, the cohesiveness on defense. You can tell that they haven't had much time to really talk about playing small. And I'm going to tell you a key non-contributor who was a really good contributor that's kind of making all of this go the way it's going is Jordan Geronimo. Jordan Geronimo, I don't know if it's his hand or what's going on, but he's a little bit lost out there, playing a position that is really his natural position, a little bit of a 4. He's trying to convert himself into a good 3, but he's a heck of an athlete. He can cause problems on switches defensively, but for some reason in Iowa, he wasn't very good. And then against Northwestern, he wasn't good. And he and Trey Galloway and Malik Renew, these are the 3 key components defensively. They have to get better. Not Trey Galloway, but Miller Kopp. They have to get better, and they have to get better fast defensively, because if you're going to play small and we're going to score, we score more than enough points. Now we have to get more stops than we got. And I worked with Chris Collins at Northwestern for a year, 2017, 2018. He is probably the brightest offensive mind in the Big Ten. I mean, his playbook is this thick. Of NBA play stuff he's gotten from his dad. Brian James is his assistant coach. He's been his longtime assistant coach. He's on the bench. He has 20 years in the NBA. He's been working for Doug Collins, for Michael Jordan. So they have the offensive end set right. The coach, Chris Lowry, has been the godsend for Northwestern because he's the defensive guru and allows them to help them become a better defensive team. And now that Northwestern showed that balance, and it really showed against Indiana because we were not prepared to contain the basketball. We let Boo Buie and Chase Audige cut us up in the pick and roll. You have to take away something. You can't give them pick and roll layups. You can't give them pick and roll shots. You can't give them dribble drives to the basket. You can't give them back cuts. You can't give them whatever they want and expect to win the basketball game. Give Indiana credit, fall back into the game as they should in Assembly Hall. But it's just like, it's almost like they expended all their energy in that segment in the first half, trying to get back in the game. And then they came out in the second half and played them even. And I'm sure you probably have, saw the same thing. What else did you see lacking from there? Were you at the game physically, or did you watch it?
I was there. Yeah, I bought tickets that morning. Made sure I was there.
I love to be at the game because I can really tell you what's going on energy-wise. What did you see energy-wise in that game?
It looked like a noon start. I think that's as simple as it is in terms of there was no energy there. And the turnovers, the communication, just some of the passes that even Jalen Hood-Schifino, we mentioned his turnovers are up. That's probably a main byproduct of him playing the guard now, the main point guard position. That's going to happen. That's what's always happened with Xavier Johnson over his career. But even Trayce Jackson-Davis had some silly turnovers in there, and just the fact that there was no communication. They looked asleep. They really didn't get any answers off the bench. In particular, you mentioned Jordan Geronimo. He's a guy that really has to step up. Played only 10 minutes because he just commits, silly fouls here and there. That's probably a reason because he thinks he's so good defensively with that length of his, but it ends up sometimes, hurting him a little bit. Didn't have a single point in that game. And this was just a two-man show. It was Trayce Jackson-Davis, who in the first half was putting up crazy numbers, had already a double-double and like 6 or 7 assists just in the first half because he played every single minute. And then Jalen Hood-Schifino just would not let this team, go away with 33 points, by far his best game. Was excellent from three, made 5 of 7 shots, I believe, from beyond the arc. And I think the last 2 were in the late few moments when Indiana was clawing their way back and time was not on their side. But it was just a two-man show, and there was just no energy inside of that place. There were no answers. And to be fair, Northwestern hit every single possible shot they practically could in the first 10 or 12 minutes. And just the crowd, which tried to get into it a bit more and definitely did when Indiana, went on a couple runs to end the first half. But even so, just some defensive lapses. You look at the last play of the first half after Indiana, we get a bucket on one end, and then the other end, we leave their big man, I believe is Barron, just wide open for an easy dunk to kind of go into the half, and that made the score 7 instead of 5, the deficit for Indiana going into the half, which really just hurt them. And they had no answers and, tried to climb their way back. But, once again, time just not on their side. And free throws, once again, AJ, this was a problem last year, and they did not help themselves, Indiana, at all. Northwestern didn't shoot great, but on the times where you need those buckets in the last 5 minutes from the charity stripe, Indiana just didn't get them, and once again just fall short in another heartbreaker.
Absolutely, man. And you mentioned something about Iowa. I mean, the statistics was exactly the same almost. Northwestern had 5 players in double figures. Indiana only had 2 players in double figures. The only difference with this game is, Northwestern had 25 points off of Indiana turnovers. Like, you're not going to win the basketball game if you're giving away 25 points. It's just not going to happen. From the guard position, Jalen Hood-Schifino, you mentioned, had an excellent offensive game scoring the ball, 6 turnovers. And a lot of them was just they took Ardege, who had 6 steals, taking the ball out of his hands. Like, this cannot happen in Big Ten play. You have to take care of the basketball. Every possession matters because these coaches are so good. They scout each other so well that it becomes a half-court basketball game. The team that can execute the most in a half-court and have the patience and get the most shots up will eventually win the game. 7 of the 8 players who played for Indiana had a turnover. So that means everybody who came in the game gave the ball away. You know what I mean? So that can't happen. First half, we give a 47% shooting from 2. We give a 50% shooting from the three-point line, and Northwestern shot 50% from three-point line from the game. I mean, the loss is in the numbers easily for this game as to what happened, what the focus was, noon start, whatever it is. I'm absolutely pumped knowing that I'm 1-2 in the Big Ten and I'm in a noon start. I can't play faster. I probably wanted to play a day after the Iowa game. So I don't want to use that as a cast of why we don't have any energy. I know Trayce is injured. I know it's a different field, but other players are getting opportunities. Bates gets to start. Geronimo gets to play. Kopp was non-existent. He has to find a way to get involved offensively because he's not a great defender. So when you're out there and you're not a great defender, you have to produce offensively, or he's going to have to look down the bench to another player, which CJ Gunn came in and brought a little bit of energy. And I think his minutes will, as long as he can keep improving little by little, not necessarily having 20-point games, but score 8 points the next game, get 3 rebounds. The next game after that, 9 points. Next game, 11 points. If he can continue to improve, it'll help Indiana's depth. And one thing I don't want everybody to do is a panic. I look at this as 5-segment seasons. You know what I mean? You have 5 games. We look like we may go. We want to finish up strong in this 5 games. At least go 2-3 in these 5 games. We don't want to go 1-4. And try to, and then the next segment, can we go 5-0 in the next segment, which is hard to do in the Big Ten. So you try to, to maintain your status as a tournament team and stay in the upper echelon. You want to win those 5-segment games. You want to win those games. You want to be over 500 in those games. You want to go 4-1. You don't want to 3-2 at the least. So I don't want to panic. This is not a do or die situation, but this Penn State game is the most important game of the season that's coming up, and we cannot have 25 points off turnovers. Our backcourt giving us 8 to 10 turnovers, and and we damn near had a triple-double from Trayce Jackson-Davis, and we end up losing the basketball game in the first half. So, him not being able to get those 3 assists in the second half shows you that we weren't running offense that was getting us open shots, because they're still double teaming, they're digging on you hard, you kicking it out, and we're missing timely threes. I've seen Bates missed a couple timely threes, and that happens, but we have to stop bleeding, man. And that's where I'm looking at this team. If I'm Mike Woodson, I'm in the locker room, I'm in practice, challenging them to who's going to step up and stop the bleeding when teams go on a run. They are going to go on a run. So are we. You can't get too high. I think we got super excited when we got up 28-4, whatever it was, 28-7 at Iowa. I mean, we won the game. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, there's 13 minutes left. These are the longest games in the world. You cannot get excited, because on the other side, they're saying, hey, by the TV timeout, by the 8-minute mark, let's be down 12. By the 4-minute mark, let's be down 8. This is the goal, and they're achieving that goal against us. And that turnover at the end of the first half, you're right, that took the wind out of Indiana's sails, man. And it was unnecessary. They score a bucket off of it, and it feels like after that great stretch, we've done nothing. And now you got to come out and re-energize yourself. So when you look at the Northwestern game, as we head into our Penn State game, if you're Mike Woodson, what are you focusing on in practice?
I think you're focusing on, physicality. I think just really trying to push these guys. They're so close, which I think is why it's so frustrating being on the outside watching this team, because you lose Race Thompson, you lose Xavier Johnson for a team that last year without those guys is nowhere near making the tournament. Right. The fact that these guys are getting close, I think, shows improvement from some of the role guys, but it just makes it that much more frustrating that you just can't quite get over the hump, as Woodson likes to say. And he's doing everything he possibly can. I heard today he was on the phone with Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, about officiating, because you mentioned it, you don't want officiating to kind of be the reason why you don't want to point fingers at that, but shows you how much he really loves his team and wants them to win and really wants to push them in practice. So I think the biggest thing, one, is just getting that communication down on both offense and defense, because you can't allow yourself to get out to slow starts once again. And 28-7 is great, but you have to realize that, as you mentioned, there's 13 minutes left in the first half, and there's so much more to go. So it's playing the full 40, as cliche as it sounds. They just haven't been able to do it this year. But I think they're finding themselves that lineup is definitely working. And I think Woodson, at least, he's talked about, in the season, he's still learning about this team, in year 2. And a lot of the guys are familiar faces from last year, but he's still trying to figure out a way to get the freshmen involved. He's kind of waiting for Malik Renew to really blossom like we saw in the first few games of this season. I think he's still a guy that really has to be figured out if Indiana wants to get back to their expectations that they hoped in the preseason. And you mentioned CJ Gunn, man, at that game. on Sunday. He was really one of the guys who I thought really gave it his all and definitely looked like he was in there with a purpose and wants to show that he deserves more minutes. And I think he definitely has a point. He didn't even appear, I don't think, in the Iowa game. Neither did Caleb Banks, the two role guys as freshmen. So they definitely have, points to prove. And Gunn in 15 minutes, I know had just 2 points and 1 rebound, but it felt like he was doing a bit more, especially on the defensive end as well. And we know he's got that signature shot, kind of his slasher, kind of pull up from 2, almost like Jalen Hood-Schifino at times. So it's a message to the younger guys to get it done. I know he had a meeting with Jordan Geronimo, just trying to get him going, because we know what he did last year. His best basketball, AJ, came at the end of last year, with the high point being the first 4 game against Wyoming, when he was huge off the bench, I believe, with 15 points, still a career high, with all those, put back dunks that were on the highlight reels the next few days. So it's just pushing the younger guys. Every single game that Indiana plays, they're going to get better. And now that they know they're without 2 of their main guys, it feels like for the rest of January, at least they know kind of what they're playing with, and every single minute that these guys play together will be better. But just some things defensively is a bit concerning. The offense looks much better. We talked about how we wanted the offense to change, and I think you're absolutely right, AJ. Playing smaller and playing a bit faster can work, but that only works if you play defense on the other end, which sometimes has struggled a little bit. And I think the minutes still have to be worked out. Trayce Jackson-Davis can't play 40 minutes every single game, because he's literally just going to get the wear and tear and basically run himself out of energy going into the late few weeks, when hopefully Xavier Johnson and or Race Thompson return.
Yeah, I think we have the leadership on the bench. I think the coaches have the right idea. I think they're dealing with the rotations and the injuries the best way they can. This is very, very simple. Take care of the basketball first. Like I said, take care of about 16 turnovers against Northwestern, a team that's not even pressing you. Those are way too many. You should have ended with 7 or 8 turnovers after that. I think Northwestern, we're supposed to be a great defensive team. Northwestern only had 7 turnovers. So, to end with 16, come on, like that changes the basketball game. Communicate on defense, make it tough for the other team, make them play into the shot clock and make them shoot over you, rebound the basketball and run. I think, they're starting to figure out how to play small. And that's something like we talked about. You have to work at it a little bit. They're kind of thrust into it. It's not like they wanted to do it. You just have to now. You have to move. You have to make Renew more of a 5 and have him spare Trayce Jackson-Davis a little bit. Trayce is not going to make it throughout the season playing 40 minutes per game. It's just not going to happen. And it just doesn't work that way, especially physically at his position. His game is pure energy. His game is raw energy. His game is being active and playing with a motor. And with a bad back and playing 40 minutes a game, your motor is going to start to sputter out just a little bit. So we need Malik to reclaim some of that gusto he had earlier in the year. He's hit the little freshman wall. You could tell Coach Woodson is holding him accountable now, because in the middle of the season, you're a sophomore now. There is no freshman. So now we looking at the film, we blaming you for stuff instead of saying, oh, come on, he'll be okay. No, it's your fault now. So fix it. Move your feet. Don't foul. No stupid fouls guarding the basketball, put them at the line and letting them keep their momentum going. I think, the center, what was his name? Number 34, Matthew Nicholson, kind of took advantage of Malik when he came in a little bit with his experience. And that's what you do to young guys in the Big Ten. You take advantage of them. So if you do those 3 things, I think we shot the ball well enough. I think we were 50% from 3-point line. We took good shots. We didn't make time. Like, it was a couple open shots when they were making their run, and we missed. We can't miss those shots. Miller Kopp, if he's going to play, he has to get involved. He has to end this game with 10 or 12 points. Miller Kopp was 1 for 2. He took 2 shots. We have to figure out a way to get him his 10 shots, because he's going to make 5 or 6 of them if they're good ones. So we got to get him back involved. And if we do that, we're in the game. We got a chance to win the game. But next man up. Tamar Bates was only 1 for 4. Put him in the starting lineup, 1 for 4 from 3, 3 from 8 from the field. He has to, we talked about this. I said, that Big Ten season is so much more different than the regular season because of preparation. These coaches know each other like the back of their hand. They already know what Woody wants to do. Woody knows what Paint wants to do. Paint knows what Underwood wants to do. So now it comes down to the players. What do you want to do? Are you tougher than the other player? Do you want it a little bit more? And Indiana played hard. They played with passion, but they did. You could tell Northwestern smelled blood, and they took advantage of it. And that's what they have to think about going into this Penn State game. What a dangerous game to roll into. Penn State is a team, that's solid, and I think they're 1-2 in the Big Ten right now. And they've had some good wins. I mean, you're talking about a team that went in Illinois and drug Illinois through the mud, and so they're not afraid of playing on the road. What scares me most, and I'm forgetting that kid's name, but their leading scorer, we have trouble defending wings. We have the trouble defending those creative wings, and that's what he brings, coming into the game as their leading scorer. So this is a team coached by Michael Shrewsbury. He had the same issues with officials as well. So we got two coaches who had a big problem with officials coming in, and I love to see how these officials react to this game, because you got to think about this, Austin. Think about if you're officiating at the high school level, and then you find out the team that you coach, that you're officiating that night, called in on you to tell you to talk about it. So you're human. You're gonna be like, y'all did this to me. Okay, I'm gonna call nothing, but I'm gonna call everything. So we get to see, an opportunity to see how these officials react to being scrutinized heavily, on social media and in college basketball over these last couple of days. Rightfully so in some cases, but like I told you earlier, I like to really just what are we doing? As we can't depend on the officials to win games for us, call tees for us, call foul. You're not getting that stuff on the road. You usually get it at home, but you're not getting on the road. We have to really focus on what we're doing. And let me ask you this question. What is Indiana basketball identity at this moment?
That's a great question, because it's so unknown. The answer is just, we don't know. It's unsure what their identity is right now, because the whole goal of this season, and really with Mike Woodson's tenure, was to bridge the past with what Bob Knight did and get it to back where that was, just in a new style of basketball. That's Indiana basketball's identity. You think of Indiana basketball, you think of Bob Knight and the five banners and guys like you that played under him. There just isn't that, mantra this season. And I don't know why specifically that is. They have an All-American in Trayce Jackson-Davis, who's once again proving himself to that worth, and one of the best big men in the country in a year that's, surrounded by a lot of great big men, but just the outside guys and the perimeter guys just aren't quite there. And I don't honestly know what their identity is right now. I don't know if you have a better answer, but you stumped me to keep it simple.
No, I don't. That's why I asked you, because maybe I'm missing something. I know initially our identity was defensive, but just because two players get hurt, that destroyed our entire identity. We don't know who we are all of a sudden. I mean, that was what worried me about seeing Race go down and watching how we didn't have a emphasis on that end anymore. So I know Race is a good defender. Xavier could be an excellent defender. He fouls a lot, but he could be an excellent defender. He's competitive, and they missed that spark. I don't think people thought that they would miss that spark as much as Indiana does, because you have to have players who play with that edge. We have some nice guys. I think Geronimo's a very nice guy. I think Miller Kopp can play with an edge at times. Trayce Jackson-Davis just plays hard. He plays with an edge at times. So those guys, we are an old basketball team. And now it's time for us to show our experience. Like, okay, we're down 1-3, and this is the time for our leadership to really show its face and really go out and give us a maximum effort. I think the Indiana faithful are going to be excited to see what type of effort, type of energy and enthusiasm we come out with against Penn State. Penn State wants this game and needs this game just as bad as we do, and they're more than capable of beating us, at Assembly Hall. But we lost at Penn State last year. We won at home by 17. So, it's going to be interesting with a coach like Shrewsbury, who was at Purdue and is used to playing in the big games against Indiana. He'll have his guys prepared.
Yeah, you bet. And it's at a place that the Bryce Jordan Center, Indiana hasn't won the past two times. I believe 2018 in December is the last time they won. And as you mentioned, it's hard to create your own energy in a building where there's not a ton of fans. There's not a lot of noise. So you have to create your own energy. And it felt like last year, I was looking back at those highlights earlier today, it feels like Indiana just kind of got lulled to sleep by the environment. I know last year was over breaks and none of the students were there and whatnot, but Indiana just straight up came out flat and did not have any answers. And the guy you're talking about is Jalen Pickett. I mean, that is their offense. He's averaging 17 points, over 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. He's absolutely insane. He's up there for Big Ten Player of the Year right now. He's by far the most valuable player on his team, I think, compared to anyone else. And they just played Purdue at the Palestra, a great venue in Philly. And Matt Painter afterwards called him the best point guard in the Big Ten. And I think that's not far-fetched from the truth, if it even is false. And the way he's playing like it right now, it's absolutely deserved of that way. And I'm looking at Penn State. They're not a very big team, but they have a lot of outside shooters. They're, I believe, one of the oldest. They might be the oldest or second oldest team in the Power Five. So they have plenty of experience. They got plenty of transfers. Jalen Pickett's a transfer, I believe, from Siena. So completely a guy who's turned it up at a big stage. They got a couple other guys as well who can shoot the three. And you look at that win against Illinois after Illinois, beat Texas in overtime in the Jimmy V, and they just drag them through the mud on their own floor and completely just dominated them. So this is a team that will play 5 out. They got a lot of really good guards. Seth Lundy is a guy who's been there for a while, did well against Indiana last year in the game in Pennsylvania. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for Indiana. And Trace Jackson-Davis has to be himself. Probably you need more than 30 to give your team a chance to win. But where does this team win on the road? We've only seen one this season, a true road win against Xavier, which is looking like their best win by far of the season. I know we argued about that last time. And, of course, after that episode, Xavier beats UConn on their own home floor. Right. Completely proved now they're on the top 12. I believe they're 12th in the newest AP poll, which is pretty funny. So how does Indiana win on the road, especially with an environment that's not going to be overwhelming like we saw against Iowa or maybe even against Rutgers, but in a smaller venue? How does Indiana do it? And do they come out like the way they did against Iowa? Or is it Northwestern? Is it somewhere in between where they're competitive like we saw last year in the University Parks? But it's a question and it's a mystery at this point, considering, how's everyone's emotions after that, Iowa game, which took so much out of them, and then a Northwestern game, which really didn't feel like a 1-point loss. Of course, the Trey Galloway half-court shot turned the deficit from 4-1 in the very end, but I felt like that game was not as close at that point, considering what happened in the first 10 minutes. But it's a mystery against a team that Indiana hasn't beaten several years on the road. So it'll be a fascinating one tomorrow night.
Absolutely. We need it, man. And we need it, it's not the do or die, but it is do or die. We have to win that basketball game to stay afloat. We're at the bottom of the Big Ten right now, sitting with a 1-3 record. We don't want to go into it 1-4 going into the second segment of our games. And the games don't get any easier. They actually get tougher. So this is a rough start, and Indiana's got a hole to climb themselves out of. But as we're fans, and we have faith in the old Crimson and Cream. We got faith in Coach Woodson. We have faith in the leadership in that program, and we think they will bounce back. They'll figure out their identity. They'll figure out how to play fast, but also play defense as well, and to slow teams down on the other end. But like we said, just take care of the basketball, get shots up, talk on your switches, and I think that will help Indiana immensely going forward. So, but hey, man, it's an awesome opportunity for us to get to talk some Indiana basketball with my man Austin Platt. We got some potentially have some great guests coming up for you the next 2 weeks. Some Indiana All-Americans that you guys will be excited that we're having a conversation with, and we'll continue to provide analysis and analysis from other sources as well. So stay tuned with us here on the House of Hoosier podcast. You can check us out on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're also on Apple Podcasts. Any way you like it, you can have it. Make sure you retweet, you share. At AJ Guyton on Twitter. And we can go from there to Field of 68 Network on Twitter as well. So stay with us, man. We appreciate having you here, Austin, man, and let you get to what you need to get to. And let's cheer these Hoosiers on and come back next episode on a positive note.
You bet, AJ. Hopefully there's some good games out there for Indiana to win. A tough stretch ahead, but we'll see how it goes. For AJ Guyton,